Ciao, everyone. I just want to say hello before we get started. I'm Peggy West, your organizer. And today we have a really new presentation that I've never heard of, and I think it's an awesome concept. But it is going to be on the storm-proof finances by Erin Nickerson of Unlimited Restoration. Erin has been around for a while, 10 years in the industry, and she actually has started up the West Palm Beach office and possibly moving on to the Carolinas, right?
Yeah.
So just some housekeeping, just to remind everyone who has not been on, or if you have been on, put your questions, please, questions in Q&A. If you have any comments, put them in the chat box. So Katie Bassford today is going to be our moderator, and she's going to get the questions as quick as we can, and they're going to be intermittent, or interactive, I should say, and we'll get you as many as we can. If we don't get all the questions today, they will be sent to Erin, and she can follow up with an email. So please just put your name. You don't have to put your email and phone number, but if you have a question, put your name, and we can find it on the registration list following the class. This is a CEU credit for our CAMs that are out there. So your posting will probably be within 1 to 2 weeks, and check your DVR course credits of your own license after about 2 weeks, please. Okay, I'm going to get started now with the introductions. I'm going to start with Vinteum software today. As I said, we got Katie Bassford on. Katie is the West Coast and the United States representative for Vinteum. Tell us what you do for associations, Katie, and about yourself.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Peggy. Vinteum provides HOA and condo management platforms. So we provide public-facing websites, we provide communication tools, information sharing tools, e-voting, really a whole gamut of functionality. So really we look to be the one-stop shop when it comes to your community association management, especially with the changing laws. If you are in Florida, there is a big compliance piece associated with that now as well. So we can get you fully compliant with those laws. So would love to get a demo scheduled and talk about how we can improve management within your community association. So please reach out if that sounds of interest. Peggy, you're muted.
I muted myself. Okay. That's awesome. And I also want to say honorable mention to the new manager that has come on board, international and national marketing manager, Amanda Janay, and also the marketing rep, Julia Alves, who is the wind beneath my wings, right? All you guys are. So thank you so much. Next, I want to introduce Chris Clark. Chris, you want to get back on?
Hi, everyone.
There you go. You want to introduce yourself and tell us what you do and what you guys do for associations.
Yeah, thanks, Peggy. Hi, my name's Chris Clark. I represent Money and Painting. We're Florida's trusted partner. We've been around since 74 years, since 1951. We specialize in residential, commercial, and HOA painting. Our services include interior, exterior painting, waterproofing, pressure washing, and structural restoration. So we have a dedicated team of over 250 professionals. We make sure that all your projects are delivered on time, within budget, and with exceptional quality. So whether it's you trying to enhance your curb appeal or protect your investment or restore your structural integrity, we've got the experience and the resources to handle your project. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay. And I do want to make special recognition for Shelley Rovner. She is in the east side of Florida, covering for Munyon, and then also Ashley Leonardo. She's over in the west. And Chris, I think you do the whole state, right?
I do.
You're everywhere. Okay, welcome and thank you. All right, next I want to introduce Diana Alert. She is the Senior Business Development Manager over at Best Roofing. Diana, tell us what you do and a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Peggy. A pleasure always to be in these webinars, and especially now that Erin is teaching today. So, Best Roofing has been in business for 47 years. A lot of you know the company already, but if you don't, we cover Palm Beach, Broward, and Dade. And we do everything and anything in your roof, from just a simple question and inspection recovery, replacement, repair, everything. We used to be specifically commercial. We did a lot of high rises. That's actually one of our main targets and specialties. But now we're also offering residential as well and new construction. So we're opening to everything and everyone. So if you ever got turned down because we didn't do something, now we do absolutely everything, and we'll love to like help you with everything that you need. My information is gonna be in the chat box, and even if you have a question, or what we want is just for you to be educated before you make a decision on your roof, because that's a big investment, and we want to be sure that you're making the right one. Thank you so much for being here today.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And we'll make honorable mention of Cameron, another representative, very visible all over the counties, and does a great job for you. So they will be on the sponsor sheet. Next, I don't see them on actually physically, but we do have a sponsor, the paving lady. Dawn Miller is the business development director. They are based out of the Palm Beach County, Florida area, but they do cover from Orlando south on the East Coast. Do an outstanding job. If anybody needs any paving, you can find Dawn's name and number, information, email on the sponsor sheet. Same thing for City Quiet Windows and Doors. Ben Friedman is the president. He is also a sponsor. He does an outstanding job. His company manufactures and installs with a white glove treatment. In other words, they take them out, they pick all of the excess debris and so on up, take it off the property as they install your windows. So it's a really nice service. And he also offers some great pricing. Next, we have PD Concrete. If anybody's looking for concrete restoration, following your milestone things, or just in general, concrete restoration. Daniel Pena is the president, and his name will also be on the sponsor sheet. We also have Jamie Gelfand. She is the regional officer for community associations at First Citizens Bank. She's been in the banking industry 10 years now, formerly a property manager for 20 years. So she's got a lot of experience on both sides of the table, and they have some great rates right now for loans for hurricanes. Get set up early. Today's about financing, but reach out to Jamie if you have any questions or needs, and see if you can work with her. I also have Bob Aleka. He is the vice president for community services for Faster IO. It's a streaming TV service. So if you have any need for that, give Bob a call off of the sheet. I want to recognize his vice president of marketing also, Michael Zirin. He's very involved, and between the two of them, they'll get you some great service. Now I want to move on to Daniel Baum. He is the CEO and the founder of COA Solutions. Hi, Daniel. Tell us about yourself and what you do.
Hi, Peggy. Hi, everyone. Nice to see everyone again today. Very simply, my job is to help your community find ways to reduce the cost of your property and casualty insurance. That's what I specialize on. That's what I focus on. I help communities to understand what they could do themselves to bring that cost down. Sometimes there's quite a few things. Sometimes it's just a matter of the market. I have a client right now. We went through all of their wind mitigation reports, only to find out that several of them were incorrect and they were not getting the proper credits that they should have been getting. And it ended up reducing the cost of their property insurance by almost 30%. So errors in documentation can be very problematic, but many agents don't look at this. They just pass the documents along. We try to look at everything very closely: wind mitigation reports, roof inspection reports, especially appraisals. I've found mistakes in appraisals before. All of these things affect your premium. As I've told you in the past, the market is always dynamic, always changing. Pricing is always changing. You should be seeing reductions this year in your property specifically. That's come down dramatically for most communities. If you're not, might be time to give me a call. If I can help you, I'd be more than happy to. Feel free. I'll drop my information in the comments section. I wish you all a wonderful webinar and a great day. Thanks.
Okay, thank you so much, Daniel. Longtime loyal sponsor. I appreciate that. And he is saving people money. And I think that's the big message that I'd like to say, what I've heard through his presentations. And insurance is very high dollars, so take a look at it. He'll break it down for you, like he said. Okay, next I'm going to introduce the Hafer Company. Nicole Johnson is the operations manager and also a partner. She also has another partner, Mark Landez. He does auditing primarily. But these two together, they do a phenomenal job in the East Coast. They have 4 offices around the state, so they are accessible to the West Coast and the East Coast. And you know, if you need anything related to your taxes, which I know just passed, but you know, sometimes you have an extension or you're not happy with your CPA or you want to take a look at a new service, they also do auditing along with the taxes and bookkeeping. So be sure and reach out to them. Lastly, they may come on later. We may do an introduction at the end. We have United Professional Engineering. Their rep is Siobhan Heredia, and then their owner is Carmelo Giglio. And I will say, in case they don't get on, but Carmelo is the current state of Florida president for the Florida Structural Engineering Association. So he's been involved for a very long time. He was appointed by the governor to originally go down when the Surfside incident happened a couple years ago. So he is very informed. He does outstanding milestone evaluations and specs for the phase 1 and 2 that you have to get onto and stay current with. I'll just mention I have got a website coming called Florida Condo Vendors for You. I'm connecting my sponsors and my speakers to the attendees or the registrants of my webinars as an alternate source when you need some bidding done. So with that, we're going to go into the presentation. I'm going to turn this over to Erin Nickerson. She is the representative for the state of Florida for Unlimited Restoration. She's got an outstanding presentation today. Erin, tell us about yourself, what you do, and what does you or I do?
Thank you, Peggy. I appreciate the introduction. My name is Erin Nickerson with Unlimited Restoration, and we are a licensed general contractor that specializes in emergency services. So all the bad things that happen to your property that you never want to happen: fire, water, mold, dead bodies, biohazard, cleaning. We've been in business for 30 plus years. We are a singly owned entity, which is important for my condominium and HOAs out there because it allows us to have structured pricing programs that actually save you money when these situations do happen. Little housekeeping. This is a CEU course credit today, 1 hour OPP elective. I wrote this class at the beginning of this year because I saw a really big void after the 2 hurricanes that hit the west coast of the Florida within 2 weeks of each other last year. And the vast majority of my associations were underprepared financially and didn't really know where to go after to recover from the storm financially. So with that, I'm going to be sharing my screen with you all now. And if you have any questions throughout this presentation, please feel free to just type them into the chat and I will try to get through them as we go ahead. Okay, great. Okay, so this class is called Proof Finances. Again, my name is Erin Nickerson with Unlimited Restoration. I'm actually the Director of Sales for the state of Florida and beyond. I've been in the industry for the past 10 years, and the landscape of the industry in restoration has grossly changed. So hopefully by the end of this presentation, you will feel better about financially preparing your associations for this impending storm season. So the agenda, we're going to talk about why we're here today, the effects of hurricanes, assessing potential costs, building emergency reserve funds, and your insurance coverages, reviewing those, establishing vendor agreements, and talk about the mitigation and reconstruction process. All right, so you are all here because you're involved in some capacity of actively managing and maintaining the asset of a condominium or an HOA. And during storm season, the consequences of not being prepared are much more significant. So having a strong plan in place, not only operationally, operationally to button up your property and unbutton your property, but really preparing financially is equally as important as the operational aspect. So I want to first start by sharing a little story with you. This is one of my board members on Fort Myers Beach during Hurricane Ian. She actually lives on the 5th floor of an 8-story building. She's what's called a prepper, and she put a camera outside on her balcony because she was going to outlast the storm. If you Google board member being airlifted from Fort Myers Beach, you can actually see her being airlifted off her building after the storm had passed. There was no access to help her from the fire life safety. She had to get on the roof and be taken off by helicopter. But you can see here that on the 5th floor of the building that she's getting stormwater into her unit. And if you average, the average height of a ceiling is 10 to 12 foot, you're looking at over 50 feet of storm surge from this storm, which is quite incredible. She actually sold this video and made a lot of money off of it. But this is just the severity of what a storm can do. So how do we prepare ourselves operationally and financially? There's 4 basic things that storms provide us, and we're going to talk about those in a few more minutes. But I found these statistics quite staggering because we haven't really been hit in Florida, especially Southeast Florida, from Palm Beach County down to Miami in quite a bit of time. And Florida has actually been hit with 8 out of the 10 most costly hurricanes in the history of the United States. I find it also incredible that in 2023, 637,000 people, respectively, have moved to the state of Florida from outside of the state of Florida. So you have this influx of people who have no idea how to prepare operationally or financially that are now actively involved in managing and maintaining properties. So from what we need to know financially and operationally, there's 4 effects of a storm. There's high winds, storm surge, flooding, and tornadoes. And we're going to run through this part pretty quickly because most of you understand this. But for those of us who have never been through a hurricane before, it's important to understand the why behind the planning process. So we categorize hurricanes on a scale of 1 through 5, and it's always based off of your wind speed. Category 1 starts at 74 miles an hour and falls just short of 100-mile-an-hour winds. And really why I bring this up in the planning process is after 45-mile-an-hour winds, your staff and your people should not be on property. So it's important to factor the wind speed into your planning process. And we need to make sure that at the point where 45-mile-an-hour hits, everybody's gone and they're back at their homes, buttoned up in the safety of their own space. Storm surge is actually the normal water of the ocean with the extra water on top of it. And usually when a hurricane happens and we see high storm surge, there's another factor, either a full moon, potentially a king tide, because why not, right? When something will go wrong, it will happen that way. And it's actually the highest loss of life and damage to property is that storm surge. Storm surge statistics. To date, Hurricane Ian has caused $113 billion in damages, and that was the last really big storm to hit Florida and cause a significant amount of damage from floodwater. Prior to that, Hurricane Katrina was the most costly storm at $160 billion in damage. We did have over 1,800 deaths due to that storm surge, which is quite significant. So assessing potential, potential economic direct damages. So you have property damage, which we all think about as the actual physical damage that occurs at your property. We often don't think about the displacement of our residences. I have a building over in Fort Myers Beach that was hit the last 3 storms, and it's been 7.5, almost 8 months since the last 2 hit, Helene and Milton, and they're still not able to have their first floor residents in their unit. So where are these people going when they are displaced? It's incredibly important to think about these things, not only as from the management side, but as if I have any board members or unit owners on here, the importance of your HO6 condominium policy. there are coverages in that policy for temporary housing, and FEMA also provides temporary housing. I don't suggest going straight to FEMA. FEMA is a government agency that it is like the agency of last resort. We really want to stress to our unit owners the importance of having proper insurance coverages because their coverage is designed to work in tandem with the association's policy to recover estate. And that includes the temporary housing. That is only going to be on the HO6 side. Cleanup and debris removal is something that I don't think that we think or talk about enough, especially in the financial planning process. There are some coverages in the insurance policies that do cover a portion of debris removal, but the vast majority of trees, cars are usually the biggest and most costly thing to remove during debris removal after a hurricane flood situation, and it's quite costly. Business interruption is also something that we don't speak about enough when it comes to assessing potential costs. Where are you going to work as a property manager if your first floor of the building is taken out and you have no electricity, you're not able to work from there? There are temporary offices. We can drop trailers on your property, but all of that comes at an expense and it may or may not be covered under your insurance policy. And then long-term property devaluation. Properties that have a history of being hit by multiple storms. So if you think Fort Myers Beach, Sanibel Island, they've had 3 pretty significant hurricanes consistently over the last 3 years. Their market value may decline as well, and that also affects the resale potential of the property as well as the insurance premiums. And repair costs really vary based on the extent of the damage. It's so funny. I was actually talking with one of my insurance agents before I wrote this slide, and it gives me personal anxiety to put numbers out there for my property managers in my residence because it can range from minor to major very quickly. So for residential properties, water damage typically ranges from about 1,000 to 10,000 plus based off of the square footage of the house and what type of water we're dealing with. Roofing repairs, we estimate from a restoration standpoint for residential properties that those can range for anywhere from $1,000 to 10,000 plus based on the square footage of the home and the materials that go into doing the repairs and replacements. Mold remediation for a single family home ranges anywhere from 500 to 10,000 plus dollars based on the source of loss, the material selections within the home, and the severity and timing of the project. Commercial properties, on the other hand, are exceptionally higher when it comes to assessing potential costs and it's based on the structure of the vertical building. Specialized equipment, the more specialty equipment that you have within that building, the higher cost of the repairs. And it really it affects the business as a whole. Some other tools that are available to you as property managers and boards of directors to help assess risk and financials are FEMA's hazardous program. And I'm going to be sending out this presentation after, so you have all the links to these toolkits. That FEMA also has a cost eliminating format that's pretty good for storm recovery. There's also the North Carolina State University ERM tool, and that's really a structured framework that helps to evaluate the extreme weather events on business operations and finances. And ready.gov also has an assessment tool to help identify potential hazards and analyzing the consequences of disasters. Building emergency reserves. So the benefits of a well-funded reserve account go far beyond these 4 points here. Making sure that you have a contingency fund as an association to cover your potential deductible is really where you need to start. It's really to get you going in the post-recovery process. It also enhances your property's value. And it gives confidence to the residents to know that you have a financial plan in place. So if and when something happens to the property, you have a resiliency program to mitigate, to stop the bleed of more potential damage happening to the property and to recover in a cost-effective way. Peggy, did you have a question?
Sorry, I was muted. I just wanted to see if you can kind of give a guesstimate, like how much money should they put aside for, I know it depends on property size and so on, but just in general, would it be like 10% of their budget? Or, maybe Daniel, you can chime in on something like this, but that would be something good to know.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. So, what I would do is I'd want to look at the property as a whole. If you're talking condominium, my best advice would be to be able to cover two deductibles. And it's you're looking at your flood deductible and your wind deductible. So, your flood deductible tends to be quite low compared to your wind. It's usually somewhere between like $1,000 and $5,000. But your flood policy actually carries a lot more teeth than a normal water damage property loss. It covers some really specific things that we'll get to in a few more slides, but like one random thing that your flood policy as an association covers is appliances within the unit, except a washer and dryer machine. So really looking at your insurances, understanding the difference between your flood versus your wind. So flood is going to be your rising groundwater. Need to cover that deductible. And if you have more than one building on your property, let's say you have villas or towers or a combination of those two, you should probably have separate policies for each structure. So just make sure you have enough financials to cover that side. And then when it comes to the wind deductible, when we're talking hurricane, it no longer is a deductible of 1, 5, 10, 50, $100,000. It becomes a percentage of your total asset. So if your asset is worth $50 million and your deductible is 5% over that $50 million, you want to make sure that you have enough financials in your reserve account to cover and to get to that deductible. That would be the best advice I could say for condo or HOA. Just make sure you're covering those two ends. Did you have another question, Peggy? Okay, great. Your hand is still up. So building your emergency reserves, we just kind of went through this. Yes, to allocate 10% of the annual operating budget for your hurricane. Reserve studies are so important to make sure that they're up to date. And that also affects your insurance premiums, making sure that you know what it is that you're worth and making sure that your insurance agent is reviewing these with you as they're going out to get you insurance coverages every year. We talked about the deductible itself and a risk assessment. I love a risk assessment when it comes to planning for hurricane season and getting with your restoration partner, having them walk your property from, if you're a condo building, from the roof all the way down through your common elements. And we actually do this for our hurricane partners, where we're looking for points of water intrusion, the state of your mechanicals, photo documenting everything. We're looking for anything that we can find wrong to help you better prepare yourself so it doesn't go wrong during storm season. So some of the best practices for building emergency reserves are engaging professionals to perform that reserve study every 3 to 5 years, and adjusting the contributions based on their findings, establishing clear policies outlining the usage of the reserve funds, making sure that you understand that if you are taking from the reserves that you're replenishing them, you're monitoring your reserve levels on a consistent basis, and maybe you have a trigger at 50 or 75% of your target reserve levels to make sure that they're in good financial health. Investing wisely, I always put on here because there are things that I hear great stories from my attorneys where associations will invest in Bitcoin, and that's not a wise way to invest your money. You want to make sure if you are investing your money in your reserves that you're doing it into strategic funds like a CD. Transparent and communications for your stakeholders are really one of the most important things financially for storm seasons that you want to be very clear about. I have quite a few condominium associations in the St. Pete area, unfortunately, that weren't clear when we started this project that they didn't have the funds to take them through all the way through the repair process, that they were waiting on the carrier because they didn't have adequate reserves. They're waiting on a loan to come through from their preferred bank. So they are behind the ball in that preparation process. Insurance coverages, and I think this is something that we we need to make sure we're on the same verbiage about before we talk. So wind damage is one part of your policy, and your wind is anything that comes from the sky into the building. So it comes from above and down. Flood damage is always going to be rising water. It's always funny to me when I have my property managers give me a call and they're a high-rise condominium building and say, Erin, I have a flood. It's on the 17th floor and it's affected all the way down to the first floor. In insurance language, we call that water damage. Because if you were to go and file a claim with your carrier and say, I have flood damage from the 17th floor, we probably would have had a tsunami. But it's so important in the hurricane recovery process that you use the correct verbiage because it streamlines the who's paying for what side of the insurance claim. Is it wind or is it flood? Flood is the rising groundwater. That's going to be the ocean, your intercoastals, your storm drains backing up. We had a crazy incident, was it 3 years ago now, where we got some insane amount of like 42 inches in Fort Lauderdale of rain within 48 hours. Once that rain hits the ground and then it rises up, that becomes flood. So you can imagine the insurance carriers going at each other. Is this wind or is this flood? They're going to duke it out that way. Business interruption is also another part of the insurance coverage review that you also want to talk about with your agent. Like I spoke about before, if your office is affected, where are you operating the business from? When you're talking insurance coverage, it's important that once a year you sit down with your insurance agent and you really get a full understanding of your policy. And really making sure that your coverage limits and your policy limits are sufficient that cover the full replacement cost of your property and assets. If it's not, and I see this a lot when I review policies with properties that I'm looking to partner with for storm season, and they don't have enough funds to cover the buildings if they were to get full flood damage on 1, 2, 3, 4 stories of the property. Because remember, in restoration, I'm not going to be your only bill. If you have floodwaters that come into your building and you have elevators, you're going to have significant elevator damage. You need to make sure that you ask your agent, am I covered for that? Deductibles we spoke about earlier, making sure you understand the difference between a flood deductible and a hurricane wind deductible, and making sure that you understand the flood insurance specifics. And the flood insurance policies change quite frequently. And I think that's the one that I see my managers not having a full grasp and understanding. So Florida state statute, when we're talking water damage in a condo building, is very clear of the rules that the association is responsible for the structural integrity of the building and they own the unfinished drywall out to the exterior of the property. When it comes to flood insurance policies, it's a little bit different of a game. So flood insurance, some of the funny things that flood insurance also covers within the owner's unit are floor coverings, appliances like I spoke about earlier, with the exception of the washer and dryer. So they'll cover the dishwasher, they'll cover some other appliances, which is interesting. They also cover doors and door casings on the interior of units during flood damage, and that's all covered under the association's policy, which is vastly different than what we have on a normal water intrusion on a Tuesday afternoon that's not a named storm. So before the hurricane, you're going to review your policy with your insurance agent. You can also ask for an independent review from a public adjuster is also a great resource because they can determine coverage. They have a license to do that. Documentation is really, really important prior to the hurricane season starting. We want what's called a pre-loss condition of your building. So basically, how I think about this is all of the mechanicals that I'm responsible for maintaining as an association, all the high ticket dollar items that I'm responsible for, the structural integrity of the building, I want a pre-loss photo or video of that. So if you're in a condo building, you're going to start on your roof, photograph your roof, or even call Diana from Best Roofing for an inspection prior to hurricane season starting so you have a state of your roof before storm. I also want you to photograph your elevator rooms, any mechanicals you have on your roof, so HVACs, you're going to do your cooling tower. And I know HVAC is a double-edged sword when we talk condominium because it is the unit owner's responsibility to maintain that item. But who gets to deal with that item when it flies off the roof and causes damage, or maybe it's peeled back because the hurricane straps have failed and not been maintained by the owner? It's going to be you as a board and you as a property manager that gets to deal with the damage that that HVAC unit causes. So we can get ahead of that by doing that annual inspection. After you have your roof, you're going to go through all your common area hallways that you're responsible for managing and maintaining. Those include your pump rooms, making sure you're testing your sump pumps, making sure that if you have Comcast rooms or hot wire rooms, that they're all in proper working order and they're not being used as storage rooms. And really being diligent in your documentation, photographs, videos, set it on a cloud and forget it. But if we are get hit by that storm, you have what it looked like before, and you have your maintenance records that justify the care and the maintenance that you've done for those items. So there can be no neglect that's said or your claim denied by your carrier for those reasons. And again, setting aside a fund to cover the deductibles and immediate expenses following a disaster. Even if you don't have the proper insurance for your building, it's so important to understand that there are certain things that aren't covered, and you should have a contingency plan to be able to get your building up and running. So I think of elevators first and foremost when it comes to condo. That is one of the hardest things to get back up and running after a hurricane. Making sure that you're looking at your elevator contract and there's some sort of timing requirement of the elevator company to respond post-storm event. I see the big guys out there really struggle with that. So review that with your account manager for that. After the hurricane, prompt reporting is one of the most crucial steps in notifying your carrier or your agent as soon as possible. If you are doing it from an association standpoint, you really need to make sure that you're having a conversation with your agent and your restoration contractor prior to filing a claim. I saw a lot of associations make the mistake of filing a claim incorrectly for the last two storms, Helene and Milton. Helene was a flood event and Milton was a wind event. And a lot of the managers that I caught after the storm were filing wind claims and being denied because it was a flood event and they just didn't know the difference between the two policies. So having the conversation with your agent and having your agent really guide you is what we want to see our managers working with. You don't have to be an expert in insurance. You just have to know the people to call who are. Detailed records. Once we return to our property post-storm, it is so crucial that you photograph all the damage that you see and keep those records. If you have a component that fails, whether it's a storm or whether it's just a day-to-day water damage incident at your property, you want to make sure you keep that component. Most specifically, I see fire life safety systems fail during storms or a sprinkler head gets hit. Anything that breaks, we want to make sure that we photograph that, keep the component until the adjuster comes out to the property. After the adjuster writes his report and the claim is settled, then throw those components away, but not until the claim is settled. Professional assistance. If you require or encounter challenges during the claim process, you want to consider hiring a public adjuster. My properties that hired the correct public adjusters during storms were able to get paid much more quickly than the ones that didn't. And if you're going to be going at it alone, I do suggest making sure that your restoration partner sets what's called a reserve with your adjuster. So when the adjuster comes out on site after the hurricane is hit and is evaluating how much money and writing his report for the carrier, you want your restoration contractor there to have the conversation and talk about what is the reserve that we're going to set. So the initial amount for the mitigation, is it 1, 2, 3, 5, $7 million? Because that gives the carrier a budget. And if we can stay within that budget, the claim process happens a lot more smoothly. Another thing you can talk about with your agent is if your asset is large enough as an association, I'm talking like 50 million plus in asset, you can actually get an assigned desk adjuster to your policy that you can, prior to storm season coming, that you can actually build a relationship with, and that helps as well. Establishing vendor agreements is probably one of the most important things that I want you to all take away from this. It is so important that you have a pre-negotiated contract for post-storm response. So, what is that? Who should you have those with first, right? The first thing I think of is your landscaper because you cannot get onto your property if there's tree, debris blocking your ingress and egress from the property. The second contractor that you'll need for post-storm response is a restoration company. All the big restoration companies, all of us have no cost programs that have a predetermined pricing structure that you know exactly what you are going to pay prior to the storm hitting. So you can really budget on what funds you will need to recover post-storm. Some other big contractors that you'll need is a roofing contractor, and you'll want to know how quickly they can get out to you post-storm. When we're talking roofs, it's really important that prior to the adjuster coming, that you're not doing any permanent repairs. So you need to have a temporary roofing solution. And if your roofing company can't get out there, you really want your restoration partner to have that general contractor arm that has those resources available. But again, we do not want to do any permanent changes until the adjuster comes out there. You're there to mitigate potential more damage happening until the adjuster comes and says, okay, you can now go and do the repairs that you need. Having guaranteed priority service is one of the most important things with these post-storm contracts. If you don't have an agreement for post-storm response, the people that do have agreements are going to be service first, and you're probably going to be at the bottom of the barrel using contractors that don't know your property. And in hurricanes, we see an influx of people from outside the state of Florida come in and try to get business. And specifically for condo HOA, they don't understand our laws and they don't know what you're responsible for versus what the unit owner is responsible for. So it gets really messy in the billing process and when you try to go recoup funds from your insurance carriers, which really streamlines the recovery process. When we're talking about contractors for your property, you really want to think, what are my items that I maintain as an association and how quickly do I get those back up and running? So in your elevator contract, you need the language of how quickly are you coming post-storm, landscaping, roofer. Another big one that I always think about are your generators. I don't think that oftentimes we think about the fuel that goes into them. Do you have a contract for post-storm fuel delivery? There's also a surcharge for post-storm fuel delivery. It's anywhere from $500 to $1,500 just to be serviced if you don't have that contract post-storm. One other thing that I always think about going into hurricane season are our current projects that we have going on at our properties. Those are the times where we're doing big roofing projects, concrete restoration projects, painting projects. It's so important that when you're getting involved with these larger scale jobs during hurricane season, that there is some sort of language in that contract that says this is our demobilization, the time that it's going to take, the remobilization, and what fees are associated with that. I actually had a building up on, it's in Jupiter. They were doing a large concrete restoration project and they had all the windows and doors off on the east facing side of the ocean building. And they had weather walls up. We had Hurricane Irma approaching, which in South Florida didn't really cause a whole lot of damage, but for them it did because they were not prepared for the storm to come and they lost all their weather walls and caused over $1 million in water damage for something that if they had the right contracts in place and they had the demobilization and remobilization plan for a storm approaching, they would have been in a lot better shape. Katie, you had a question?
Yeah, we got a question in the chat. So it looks like it says, how do I lock up a landscaper and tree company pre-storm when in post-storm circumstances, these companies can profit to the highest bidder?
Great question. So the key is really vetting your vendors and working with the right contractors. The bigger landscaping companies have post-storm cleanup contracts, and it gives you a specific time frame that they have to come out to you post-storm. And remember, we're a business just like you're a business. So the more that we work together throughout the year, the higher up you go on the priority list. So if you are a condominium and you're giving one contractor all of the work and you're my number one client, have the conversation and just ask, where do I fall on your list? How quickly can you get back out to me and get that in writing from them? When it comes to tree trimming, you should be doing a twice annual tree trim. You want to do one pretty much start of hurricane season, so end of May, early June, and then right before the high of the hurricane season, if you can, at that September, October mark. That really is to make sure that the large trees are at least 10 to 15 feet away from branch wise, your roofs, windows of the structure of the building. And if you guys need some referrals to some good landscaping companies, I'd be happy to give you a couple names that I've seen do a great job and that I know have hurricane contracts. In those contracts, the scope of service needs to be clearly defined. So Bernard, like you said, what does the pre-storm cut look like? What does the post-storm cut look like? And the timing of them getting out there. Activation triggers are triggers that really activate that contract, right? So storm comes and then the time clock begins. When are you getting to me? I think really clear expectations need to be set with that. And I like to reach out and have my clients reach out to me pre-storm and I say, hey, this is the plan. Has anything changed or are we still good to go? I think you should take that approach with all your contractors that you're expecting to have help you recover post-storm and getting it in writing. Pricing and payment terms should be detailed and include any provisions for overtime or emergency surcharges. A lot of companies, like you said, Bernard, do have surcharges when it comes to post-storm, but it's better to have a service provider that's going to be there and that you can count on by paying the surcharge than to not have one at all or to be at the bottom of the list. Compliance requirements are really important, especially for the state of Florida. When it comes to post-storm recovery, you need to make sure that your contractors are abiding by federal, state, and local regulations, especially if reimbursement from agencies like FEMA are being done, and in most situations they are. What does that actually mean for you guys here? Depending on the county that you're located in, there could be specific building code requirements. And usually after a hurricane has happened, if you're not in a Miami-Dade building code, a lot of counties do upgrade to new building codes. The biggest thing that I see post-storm is to have your existing components come up to code. HVACs for your individual unit owners, if you have the HVAC units on the first floor, they usually fall into that categories and a full replacement is needed to get them to code. The other thing that I see most commonly for associations are fire life safety systems, panels that are damaged by water, then needing to be upgraded to code. That is a huge expense that we don't think about. But there actually is insurance coverage, ordinance and law that if you don't have that for your property, I highly suggest you speak to your agent now about that, especially before hurricane season. Ordinance and law, how I think about it, is like gap coverage for car insurance. It's you have a problem. Let's say your electrical panel is an old one that is now not in compliance with code, and you have to get it to the new one. Ordinance and law covers the cost between the old panel, and the insurance carrier is only going to pay for the old panel according to your flood and your wind policies. And then to get to the new panel, it's a significant amount more money for the installation, the cost of the panel itself, the labor. It covers that gap of the cost of getting you to that new panel. So it's something that you definitely, if you don't have it now, especially if you're an older property, it's really, really important. The force majeure clause is a provision that addresses unforeseen circumstances, clarifying the responsibility during each party during hurricane events. If you are not familiar with this, speak to your attorney about it. It gives you a lot of power as an association. As important as your agreement with your vendor is, it's also important to know that your vendor is ready before storm season. So establishing that line of communication prior to, or if a named storm is coming to hit us in Palm Beach County or the Tri-County, reaching out to your vendor and saying, hey, you're my go-to guy. Am I still on your list? Where do I fall? And open up that line prior to the storm. There's also things that we can do as your contractors, and we can pre-stage at your property. There is usually a fee that's involved with that, no matter what type of vendor we're talking, whether it's restoration contractors, whether it's roofing vendors, or maybe you have a large-scale concrete restoration project going on. It may be necessary to stage pre and post on the property. Multiple vendor agreements can be a ace in your back pocket. Maybe you have a plumber that does your day-to-day small stuff and you use a large plumbing company for your big stuff. Having those multiple contracts can be a good thing in those situations and a cost savings for the association. And most importantly, it's so important that you're doing training and drills with your team, that you're doing a conversation like this with everybody who is involved in managing your and maintaining your property, so they all understand the roles that they play in the post-recovery process. I even do drills with my properties, especially my higher end condominium buildings. I just did one with the Ritz-Carlton last week where we actually go on site with all of the people that are involved in the recovery process, so we can meet each other, we work together, we know who belongs there and who doesn't belong there, and who our points of contact is. The more communication and the more training we give to our vendors and our internal teams, the smoother this process goes in the post-recovery, which also saves you a lot of money. That is my last slide. Does anybody have any questions for me before we sign off? Bernard had one more. Bernard, I would be happy to give you a few. Oh, that was Peggy. All right. Well, thank you all for joining me today. I really appreciate that. Give me about 24, 48 hours to get everything filed with the DBPR and to email you back out all the certificates of completion. If anybody would like an evaluation of their property, I did see Fabiola Benz on here. I will give you a shout after this class and we will get together to get you started on this.
No other
Peggy, I'll
questions,
turn.
Katie?
Not seeing anything so far in the Q&A or the chat, but go ahead and
Okay.
pop those in there. Last call for questions, everyone.
Last call.
Great presentation, Erin.
Yeah,
Yeah, very
awesome.
informative.
Very good.
Daniel, how do you feel about ordinance and law?
To your point, I think it's really important for older properties, not so much for newer ones. I think people don't realize that when their older materials are no longer code compliant, that they're not just going to get the money to put brand new ones in. So definitely an important component if you have an older structure that you know to be not code compliant. Like if you have non-UL rated electrical panels, as you mentioned, that's a big one these days because a lot of carriers won't write those. There's very few who will write the Zinsco panels anymore. If you have things like aluminum wiring, that could be,
Yeah.
you'd have to rewire the entire building. So that can get really, really expensive if you're not up to code on some of these issues. And ordinance and law is obviously a big part of making sure you'll have coverage for that. I also liked what you said about the difference between the hurricane coverage and the water coverage. Those are, people don't realize. I'll talk to people about flood coverage and they'll think that means pipe broke, and not, I understand that's, if you're not in the insurance space, that's easily misunderstood, but a pipe break is property coverage and floodwaters rise up from the ground. So getting explanations like that, understanding what coverage, as you pointed out, what coverage you have, what coverage you're lacking. We had a seminar not that long ago where we talked about, just making sure you understand what your exclusions are prior to a storm hitting,
Absolutely.
because there are things that you don't realize aren't covered. So yeah, great presentation. I thought all around you did a really good job of explaining things and giving real life examples. And I always appreciate knowledgeable professionals like yourself doing it.
Thank you, Daniel. One thing that I am seeing right now in some really bad policies that have been written by agents who are trying to save the association money is a water damage exclusion. You don't want that exclusion, especially for hurricane season. It means you have no coverage for a hurricane hitting you with wind-driven rain or floodwater. It is a water damage exclusion that is you don't want. That is the worst of the
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's basically like you have no coverage. I mean, you're
Correct.
fulfilling your obligation legally to bind, RCV, replacement cost coverage, perhaps, but you're really not buying insurance. You're essentially just buying it for the sake of fulfilling your obligation. But then when the storm hits, you're going to be SOL, right?
Naked.
It's negligent. It's borderline negligent. You are not protecting your fiduciary responsibility as a board, as a manager, when you're signing those things, because your asset is not protected. It's really
Yeah.
bad, but I've seen it a lot lately. Going into this storm season, watch what you're doing when you're doing this, and call Daniel for advice.
Thank you. I try not to get into the, what is required, because people like to make their own business decisions around what they think they need for coverage and where they are financially. But look, it's a difficult thing to try to guesstimate what kind of reserves you need to have and what type of financials you need to have if a storm should hit. The reality is none of us know. Like, look what happened last year, right? Now, I'm in Delray Beach, and we didn't have any hurricanes hit, but we had tornadoes that spun up just, a few miles to the north. And those are wind events, and that's something you need to make sure you have coverage for. So you just don't know. And obviously following the guidelines of making sure you have full replacement cost value, keeping up with your appraisals. People don't realize the law says you have to get a new appraisal every 36 months. I see communities on a regular basis that haven't gotten a new appraisal in 5 or 6 years, which means the insurance company is arbitrarily increasing your values based on their own calculations, even if you're not giving it to them, which could be a mistake. I've seen communities who got appraisals at the height of the real estate market at 2023. And now if they got a new appraisal in 2025, the appraisal actually has come down, and meaning they don't have to have as much coverage. So these are all the types of things that come into play that I think a lot of people don't realize, and you really need experts in your space to guide you on and give you advice on. And it's nice to have people like yourself to lean on, and some of the other vendors that are sponsors here to lean on for these kinds of questions.
I appreciate you saying that. One thing that I don't think I emphasized enough during this presentation is the importance of having a workable line of credit in your recovery process is a huge asset. My buildings that had that line of credit prior to the storm recovered much quicker than my associations that are applying for loans from their preferred banks in those areas after the storm. You're literally sitting and waiting in a line with God knows how many other properties that also need that line of credit from that same local branch bank in your area. It takes a lot more time to do it after the storm than before the storm. So talk
Absolutely.
to your
Absolutely. And a
financial.
preferred sponsor on all of these webinars is First Citizens Bank. They're always talking about how they can help finance these types of things and get you lines of credit. And it's really important, because if you don't think about it in advance and you don't have the resources to correct what's happening, that the issues that come up in a storm will only become worse and worse and worse, and the damage becomes more and more extensive, and you're scrambling to find money to just try to stop the pain, and you've got more and more problems created from the lack of ability to do. The other thing that I couldn't agree with you more on, and I think is so important and people don't realize, is having an agreement with a restoration company prior to the storm coming and trying to get onto their emergency list. It's amazing that you guys offer a no-fee emergency list that if you're one of the lucky ones on their list, they're going to get to first. Another restoration company quoted to me something I didn't know. They said that if every single fan and humidifier was to be utilized in South Florida, they would all be gone within 12 hours. If every single one of them was utilized in South Florida, you have 12 hours to get that on your property, or there won't be any available for you. I thought that was a crazy number, because with the number of communities that could be possibly affected, that's That's nothing, 12 hours. So
Yeah.
again, having these types of relationships, even you don't, and as Erin pointed out, you don't have to pay for them per se, but you should have these in advance and make sure you know who's coming and who's part of your team, so that when these situations happen, you're not scrambling to figure it out at the time, because that that stresses all of us out, including you. It creates fear amongst your community. Having that immediate response and having a team who you know is going to come in and support you will take a lot of that stress and pain away and make your community feel a lot better about what you guys are doing as board members and managers.
Yeah, and remember, this is a business, so we need to have preparedness, we need to have plans in place, we need to have preparation. And as a restoration company, I'm also a business, and I have a glass ceiling of an allotment of people that I can respond to. So it's so important that when you're getting in bed with these restoration contractors, that they're coming and walking your property, they understand your needs as a community, because every community is a little bit different. There is no circle that this is the circle for every community. It's not that simple. And the evaluation of your property is really what the partnership that you're looking for from your service provider. So they understand what you need, what communication you need, what you're responsible for, what you're not responsible for. What does that communication look like with your ownership, right? It's not just as simple as, hey, I'm going to pick this one company and never hear from them again, cross my fingers and hope that they service me in the storm. It's bigger than that.
We had
Katie, did you have
one
your
more
hand up?
question here. Yeah, from Troy. It looks like he asked, can condos be insured for only 80%?
Ooh. That's a Daniel. I'm not
I'm sorry, I
touching that
didn't hear
one.
the question. What was the question?
The question was, can condos be insured for only 80%?
Not if you want to follow the statute. I mean, the statute says very clearly you need to be at 100% RCV, replacement cost value, and you must calculate that every 36 months by ordering a new appraisal. So if you want the legal answer is no, 80% is not enough. If you want a different answer, call me separately. I can't give you any other answer but what the legality is, but I know of communities who are not 100%, and what you have to understand is the risk exposure you're taking by not coming to full replacement value. And that risk exposure is not just on your property, it's also on you individually as board members, because you can be held personally liable for not fulfilling your obligations as board members. And where the challenge comes in is I deal with communities who are financially in an extremely difficult place, not having availability of capital to even meet their day-to-day obligations, and they don't know what to do without having insurance. It's a huge problem for many communities. I would never guide anyone to break the law or not follow the statute. So that my answer is you need 100% RCV. If you can't do that financially, honestly, my other answer is go speak to your attorney and ask them what they think you should get, because that's the best answer anyone can give you. We can't tell you what the other alternatives are if you're at 80% and then a storm hits and you've got problems. So I will have business conversations with people outside of this webinar or any public place to sort of talk you through what's happening, but I will tell you what the law says, and anything other than the law, I suggest you speak to your attorney.
Good answer. We have John and Peggy that have a question left.
Peggy, you can go first.
Okay, I just wanted to make a comment that I picked up over the years. Just you should have a committee, someone on the board, maybe be the head person for your hurricane preparedness. Get a binder together, get something, in concrete that says when this happens, because your property manager may need to leave the property. And you need to have 4 or 5 people who understand what to do. What some of you are snowbirds, you may not even be down here and you may be on the committee. So put a committee together and just add to your quality of your management of your community. And, you know, just things happen and people have children and kids and families and too many things that, you know, everybody cannot be there all the time. So I highly recommend putting together a community committee for hurricane preparedness.
Thank
John?
you, Peggy. I'm in complete agreement with you. I love a liaison for a hurricane season. Something that we've done at URI is we've created a custom app that's free of charge for communities that we get into hurricane season with. And the app is designed to whoever our first responder is going to be, whether it be our property manager, whether it be a board member, whether it be the liaison for hurricanes, they can open up this app and it essentially tells you all the steps that you need to go through to help recover the property. And anybody that'd like more information, I'd be happy to show you.
Awesome. John, you want a question before I close it out?
Yeah, just really wanted to make a comment that I've heard a lot of good stuff, and I apologize for not being here in time. I'm sorry I missed the first portion. But, you know, a lot of the things, a lot of the great stuff that I've heard tonight or today is, you know, regarding insurance, regarding restoration, regarding plans, regarding people who are not in Florida while the, you know, board members who may not be in Florida while others are. One of the things that connects all these things together for buildings is your ability to communicate. And from Faster.io, we do fiber in buildings for high-speed internet and streaming TV. And one of the things I just wanted to mention real quick is we provide you a battery backup on site. So if there is a storm or if there is something that knocks out the power for several days that you know, we have no control over, our data center is still up and running. We have 4 truck-sized generators outside. Your fiber and your internet are still running because you have battery backup. So you can connect to the key people that are here, you know, to get to do what you want to do and execute your plans and talk to your family confidently without having to worry about a 3 or 4 day power outage. You
That's
can connect
really
to your
cool.
insurance agent, connect to your restoration company, and connect to people. It's pretty critical because you never know. Cell phones could be down too. You just, you know, in this day and age, just don't know. So thank you. Thanks for my time.
Okay, that's Faster.io, you guys, if anybody didn't catch the name. The contact there again is Bob Aleka on the sponsor sheet going out. I'm going to close it out. I cannot say awesome presentation. That's one of the best presentations I've heard. So great
you.
job, Erin. I want to mention that I have some upcoming things, but Erin is the current president for the CAI Association in Gold Coast, which is in the southeast part of the state. They have some events coming up I'd like to mention on May 13th. From 8:30 to 4:30, they have a education social. It's going to be a CEU course on AI, as well as a social afterward, like a happy hour. Go to the website to do your RSVP. They also have on May 15th from 6 to 8:30. This is a Diamond Classic event, and they're going to be speaking, let's see, Erin, maybe you could do this a little better. What is the
Sure.
Diamond Classic?
So the Diamond Classic is our annual baseball tournament. It's the Jupiter team versus the Fort Myers team. We host an event free for all of our property managers and homeowner leaders to register, get to know us as CAI, the Gold Coast chapter, have a little bit of fun, and hang out at the baseball game together.
Okay. And who's the players again? The Hammerheads of Jupiter and the Fort Myers
Fort Myers Mighty Team. We'll go with that.
Okay, we'll go with that. Okay. On May 20th, there's a condo certification class for condominiums only. And that's going to be by Jeff Rimbaum, an attorney down here, Kay Bender Rimbaum. And then I'm just going to mention 2 because we're kind of going over a little bit. I have coming up also on May 5th, that's coming up Monday. I have another condo certification webinar. This is one you can do online, and it's from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. being put on by Brian Barcelona, who is the president and owner of Limestone Property Management. And then on May 12th, I'll mention we have a HOA board certification coming, put on by Jane Boland. She's an attorney down here in South Florida, and that is going to be also from 9 a.m. to 1. Thank you, all my sponsors. Thank you for moderating, Katie, and thank you, Erin, of course. Have a great
Thank you.
weekend, everyone, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.
Thank